These are the top 10 hatchbacks from the 1990s you just don't see anymore. As a whole, the 1990s were a mixed bag. It was the same decade that gave us AOL Instant Messenger, as well as the song M-Bop by Hanson, sweater vests, and mullets until about 1993, thanks to a pre-existing mullet provision in federal law that grandfathered in mullets acquired before January 1st, 1991. That law has since been repealed. The 1990s were also a mixed bag of cars, with BMW 540d station wagons in one city and V6 engine sedans that made well under 200 horsepower in another. Throughout the 1990s, hatchbacks were never considered premium vehicles. And even the third-generation Volkswagen Golfs that were fitted with the same options as the aforementioned V6 sedans were still seen as college students' cars. Due to their limited use, hatchbacks were often quickly used up and thrown away, which leads us to these top 10 hatchbacks from the 1990s you just don't see anymore. First up is the Mazda 323. Even though the exterior styling of the 323 was sleek with a wraparound taillight design and nicely proportioned profile, it was already a known quantity by the time the sixth-generation car arrived for the 1989 model year. There was no option for these 1.6-liter engines, not even luxuries like power steering. Many young drivers learned how to drive a manual transmission with these models, as they offered great fuel efficiency and were a popular buy at the time. Mazda introduced the Protégé for the 1994 model year, but hatchbacks were no longer available in North America. Next is the Hyundai Excel. With its 3-door and 5-door body styles, the second-generation Excel entered the U.S. showrooms for the 1989 model year. The Excel has a 1.5-liter four-cylinder with 81 horsepower, which made more of a dog sled in its day. It was still the early days for Hyundai in the U.S., since the company had only launched operations here in 1986. With its 5-speed one-color plastics and fiddly switchgear, the Excel represents cheap point-to-point transportation. But its biggest legacy is that it began the rise of Hyundai in North America. However, the Excel was not the only vehicle to come from Hyundai. Thankfully, the Accent arrived as well. Next up, the Ford Aspire. From 1992 to 1997, the Aspire succeeded the Festiva, but was built overseas by Mazda and sold in the U.S. The Aspire used the same basic formula as the Festiva: economy transportation with a 100 horsepower engine. Your grandparents gave you the hatchback when you headed off to college as a gift, and it was probably the first and only time you wish you still had Nana's 1980s Buick. Furthermore, it made the oval-shaped Ford Taurus feel and look like a presidential limousine. Gray, slippery plastics and a rear spoiler were optional options, but a depressing interior was included by default. The spoiler was merely decorative. Aspire's bright late 90s ice cream color saved it from total invisibility, but there was no hiding its big step down from Ford's Escort. A 0 to 60 time of more than 15 seconds also didn't help. Aspire was eventually replaced by the Ford Focus. Next is the Daihatsu Charade. Despite its name, the Charade was actually a pretty well put together car sold in the U.S. from 1988 until 1992. The only problem is that few people realized Daihatsu was selling cars in the U.S. Powered by the tiny 3-cylinder and 4-cylinder engines, the Charade made the Volkswagen Golf look like a luxury vehicle. Although the hatchback looked less generic than the sedan, there was no way it was going to stand out in traffic. You might think your neighbor owned one of these for years, but it could have been a Mazda 323 or an old Civic. Production of this model ended in 1992. Next is the Pontiac Firefly. The hatchback launched in the U.S. as the Geo Metro and then as the Chevrolet Metro. It was rebadged as a Suzuki Swift and was sold in Canada as the Pontiac Firefly. Our neighbors to the north had been wearing Firefly badges since the early 1980s and until the year 2000. Proving to be a very popular seller despite the lack of cold weather specific features, there have been a few that have made it to the U.S., mostly serving as cars that U.S. college students dumped here after graduating. Chevrolet Aveo later replaced the Firefly in the United States. Next, we have the Subaru Justy. With Subaru's dominance in all-wheel drive station wagons, it's easy to forget that they offered a small economy car not that long ago. The Justy was sold from 1987 through 1994 in the U.S., when it battled the likes of the Geo Metro. Powered by a 1.2-liter engine, the Justy was not a great performer, but it carved out a niche as cheap transportation for high school and college students. The Justy's main legacy was teaching young people how to drive stick shift, as the Justy was only available with a 5-speed manual transmission. A 4-wheel drive version was available as well. Next is the Chevy Corsica. You aren't looking at backyard bodywork here. This is a rare Chevrolet Corsica hatchback, which was available from 1989 through 1991. This hatchback, which was based on a slightly reworked Corsica sedan, was disguised as a 4-door, thus saving its owners from being seen in a 3-door vehicle. The Corsica hatch, which never made it to its namesake island, was discontinued after the 1991 model year due to slow sales. Next is the Nissan Micra. Do you remember the Nissan Micra? The reason for this is that only Canada was offered the first generation Micra from 1982 until 1992. Nevertheless, a few have found their way into the U.S., despite the fact that we haven't seen one south of the border since 2007. Next is the Geo Storm. Geo Storms were available from 1990 through 1993 as a 3-door hatchback or a 3-door station wagon. As the Storm was also available as a 2-door wagon, and because the Geo Metro also existed, the hatch had to adopt a coupe-like shape, which robbed it from some versatility and added a noisy rear window. The rest of the interior was just as noisy, though at the time the car's low weight and pokey 1.6-liter and 1.8-liter engines made them very good handlers. It was a pretty fun car for the money, even though the latest examples barely lasted past the end of the 1990s. Last on the list is the Eagle Summit. As part of Chrysler Corporation's tradition of importing small Mitsubishis, the 1990 Mirage was imported as an Eagle Summit. The Eagle brand combines Renault, Chrysler, and Mitsubishi vehicles. Why? While Eagle dealers didn't have a good answer to these questions, one could also get this hatchback as a Dodge Colt or a Plymouth Colt, as part of Chrysler's plan to flood every brand with a variant. The base engine was a 1.5-liter 4-cylinder with 81 overstretched horsepower, while a 1.6-liter engine offered more possibilities, like successfully merging into freeway traffic thanks to its 123 horsepower. With its tiny 13-inch wheels and 5-speed manual gearbox, this car offers a bit of slow car fast fun for commuters as well as college students. You could also get a sedan for fancy outings to the opera house and pricey steakhouses with friends. Eventually, Chrysler ditched captive imports and introduced the Neon. Well, there you have it. 10 hatchbacks from the 1990s you just don't see anymore. What do you think about these hatches? Leave us your comments below. If you liked this video, share it with others. And leave us a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that bell for future videos. Again, thanks for watching.